Cool. So we'll go through the board challenge, the first React board challenge that we've had. So the beginner wasn't too involved, but there were lots of mistakes in the intermediate. So during the course of people's attempts and suggestions, then we had lots of different ways or lots of different attempts at solving quite a few sections of the intermediate. So we'll spend the majority of our time there. And rather than talking around the topic too much, we're actually going to solve them live. Yeah? Cool. So I've just begun to create a little app that renders both the beginner and the intermediate board challenges. So beginner-wise, we had that, I believe, to begin with. And yeah, I think everyone got the export statement. So we had export default, right? We were using export default. Now some people wanted to write it down there, and other people, in the majority of cases, just wanted to put it straight in front of the function, like so. Either is acceptable. Porrick, you had a question regarding the exports and stuff, yeah? Sorry, I've asked you at the wrong time when you're still eating. But essentially you were saying, I forget exactly now, but to do with the naming, yeah? Oh, still not. Okay. Let me, all right. Let me put it back. Well, we can leave it the way it was. So that was the first section, right? Just to export something. Still saying does not contain a default export. Yeah, I think we're good once we fix the warning. So, yeah, go on. Yep.
I think the question was if we're doing the export default at the bottom.
Yeah, at the bottom.
Just have one function, do we have to write export default?
Oh yeah, so you said, could we just do that? And will it be clever enough to recognize that there's only one function in the file? And I haven't tested that, but it seems very unlikely that it will work to me. So yeah, if we've got multiple functions within this file, then we need to explicitly name one of the functions that we want to export as a default, yeah? So you've got two ways of doing it. You can either write export default with the name of the function, or you can put export default in front of the function that you want to default to be the default export. So two ways of doing it. I still like to put it at the bottom. I think Ricardo prefers to put it at the top. So hey, whatever you prefer. As well as that, most people spotted that we've got adjacent elements in here. So we needed to fix that. And I think we had at least two ways being suggested. The first way was, can we just do a div? Absolutely, we can. So once we fix that, we can now see that something's getting displayed. I should get rid of all my props, in fact, because we didn't have any props to begin with. And in fact, we didn't really have any of this, did we? So let me get rid of that as well for now. Okay. So back in the beginner code. Yeah, to get rid of this adjacent element issue, which is that sort of error you're going to get, yeah? Passing error, adjacent JSX elements must be wrapped in an enclosing tag. So the enclosing tag that a few of you chose to use was just an extra div. And there's nothing wrong with that, but React has its own way of dealing with all these adjacent element issues. And the way that it has created is the React fragment. And that will be a little bit better performance-wise because we're not rendering lots of useless divs in a large component, in a large application. So all of these divs are going to get rendered to the DOM. So for example, if I inspect, I think even though, no, I'm going to need to, we'll look at it later when we've actually passed in some props and we'll inspect the code and see the difference between rendering a div versus rendering a fragment. So rendering a fragment we can do multiple ways. So the old way was literally to type out react.fragment, opening and closing tag, and have that as the parent element. What's that, Richard? Sorry. We've left the extra div in there, right? So let's get rid of that one. Cool. So that was one way to do it. And then people got fed up of writing React fragment. So now we've just got the shorthand of an empty tag. And that will also render as a React fragment. So there's another way that people haven't suggested, and I mentioned it to Ewan, and I said we could wrap everything inside of an array. Now, it still doesn't like it just like that, because it's treating each JSX element as a separate entry in the array. So we would need to separate each element with a comma, and then it does work. So if you do want to wrap it in an array like that, make sure that you... Oh, I was trying to format it nicely and it's just chucked it all together, but okay, still just about readable. Yeah. So make sure that you put that comma in there to separate each of the individual elements as well. Nice. And I think there was only other one thing on that, and that was just to make sure that it had a closing semicolon, right, on the beginner one. And then I asked you, how do we display that in our actual app? And to me, this is something you've done multiple times. So I don't know whether it was just my wording or what, but how do we actually get that beginner component in this case, or user component, to be rendered? So I called it user beginner at the top. How do we get that to be rendered in our app? How do we display it on our screen? And this was something that tripped quite a few of you up, or it took you quite a long time to work out how to do it. But essentially, we're just defining another tag, yeah, another element in our page. This time, rather than being one of the preset HTML tags, it's instead our own custom defined tag, or our own custom element, our own custom component. And in this case, it's called user beginner. So we just select where we want to render it and type user beginner. So if we looked at our page now, it's not going to be any different. That is massive. Why is it so big? Let me get rid of the inspection for now. Yeah, so we still haven't displayed anything at the moment because we haven't passed any props to our user beginner component, right? So we're trying to render two divs with props.firstName and props.lastName inside. But if we haven't passed any props to our beginner user function, then nothing is going to get displayed. So how do we pass props to a component? You should know now. We do it by just doing what? Someone suggest? First name or last name, or both ideally, right?
Say first name equals
Yeah, so we just literally write in the component itself, in the tag there, first name equals, Barrios, Spanish Boris. And then we wanted the last name as well. Oh, okay. Boris the Brave. Yep. So because I've just copied first name, Boris has got overwritten, right? The first prop gets overwritten and it's just displaying the Brave. So instead, let's put last name. And we get Boris the Brave displayed. And I asked you as well, how will they be displayed? Will it be one above the other, like that, or side by side? And I think everyone got it correct, and you said one above the other, like that, because we've used divs, yeah? Two separate divs, which are block level elements. Cool. Any questions on the beginner stuff? No? So just remember multiple different ways of enclosing adjacent elements. Could use arrays, could use React fragments, could use another div. So I said that we'd have a quick look once we rendered something to show the difference between using divs and using one of the other methods. Sorry, I just like it like this so I can see what's going on. Cool. So we can see here that we've got our beginner paragraph, then we've got our Boris div, and then we have, let's get that down a bit. Yep. So we've got our Boris div and our the Brave div as well. Yeah. So just two divs for the beginner component have been rendered. That's using the array method. If instead we returned all of this stuff without the array, obviously, all of this stuff but wrapped in another div, then of course we get this div here, yeah? Use $0 in console to refer to this element. So there's nothing in it, right? It's just an empty enclosing container div. So it's not too much of an issue with just this one small component, but when we've got lots of components, we're rendering all these unnecessary divs. So it's a slight performance hit and it's just unnecessary. So if we use the array method or we just use our React fragments, then we can see that we don't get the unnecessary divs being rendered. Yeah? So I would favor the React fragment or the array methods, definitely. Unless you want to assign some styling to all of the things, then of course you might have that enclosing div to style all of those child elements. All right. Intermediate? Yeah? Cool. So I think I've got this one almost the same as what it was on the board, but maybe there's just a few extra things in there. Let's go full screen briefly. So I've started straight off with a class. I know it said a function on the board, but all of you said, oh, we use a class component because that's the way you've currently learnt how to work with stateful components, is using class-based components. Yeah, and then there was some people suggested putting props in here. Some left it off. Do we actually need to explicitly declare it? Is that a no? Yes, no, Nalofa? No, we don't. So it will still be defined down here as long as we make sure that we render the component again. So same thing, right? To render the component. This one I've called intermediate. And we can have someone else rendered in there. Oh yeah, user beginner, so we change that one to intermediate. Cool. We didn't have this in here to begin with, we just had that, didn't we? This dot toggle last name. So we spoke of multiple ways this morning to write our event handlers, and I think we sort of decided that the favoured method, at least in the future, would be the property initializer syntax. So how would I write that as a property initializer syntax? Toggle last name equals, parentheses, arrow, that, yeah? Cool, so that sorts out the event side of things, and then we need to do something with set state inside of the event. And again, we had quite a lot of suggestions here. Let's just have a look, see whether we're displaying anything at the moment. Oh, I left my comma in up the top. So if I just comment out the beginner one for now, because we're not working with it anymore. Yeah, so we're currently displaying the props, which is good. Of course, if we click the toggle last name button, nothing's happening at the moment because we haven't set up the set state method correctly. And we've also got everything all on one line and just squashed together as well. So there are a few suggestions that people did for that. So quite a few people just wrapped the whole thing in backticks. So I did something like that, right? This dot props dot first name, and making sure that we explicitly had that space, and then wrapping the whole thing in backticks, and making sure that this was also a bit of executable code. So something like that, yeah? So now we've got the space. So if I had multiple spaces here, is it going to count one space or multiple spaces? Say again? Multiple? Yeah? Oh, that's me. I would have actually thought multiple, but it hasn't. Don't need that anymore. Yeah, so it's only counted the one space. We put some there. So it hasn't counted the spaces or the tabs. Okay, that's cool. I thought that used to be a drawback of using backticks. Nice. Okay, so we can space it out as we wish. If it's on the same line, does it make a difference? No. You want me to end the backticks after first name? There, or with a space this time? With a space this time? Mm-hmm. So that should also work, right? Yeah. Yeah, if that's a bit more readable, probably is. Yeah, I was just thinking the whole thing was one string, so to me that's why I included it all together. But yeah, either way works, whatever you find easier to digest. Right, so on to... So yeah, the toggle event's not working at the moment. And why is it displayed? Because I've set that to true, whereas we initially had false, right? So originally there's no second name there, but when we hit that button, we want that second name to display. So a few suggestions we had were, someone did this dot state dot is last name visible, colon, and then I don't think this was one person, but I'm combining two things here. And then someone also just used a value of true rather than having something else. So what problems do you see with those values there? Let's do the this.state one first. Will that actually set is last name visible to true?
I think it's supposed the key should be this dot state. It should only be is last name visible.
Yeah. So that's not compiling at all because we're already calling the set state method, so we're already looking inside the state object. So we just need the key of the state property there, yeah? And then true, how about true? That works, right? Yeah, but it doesn't toggle. So we want it to toggle, to go on and off. So true, now it's just stuck on true. Every time I click that button, it's trying to reset is last name visible to true. Yeah. So instead, people suggested using the not operator. And then again, we also had something like that. But then you can clearly see that that is not defined. Well, in fact, one of the first suggestions was that. And you said it worked, right, Vince? But how did you get that to work using something similar to that? Yeah.
I'll tell you later.
Okay, thank you. You let me know what you did because I'm curious to see how you got that to work. But yeah, so we've sorted out the key now. We've correctly referenced that key and then the value. So here, just doing $is last name visible. Well, it's searching for a variable called is last name visible and it can't find one. Yeah, it says it's not defined. Why can't it find one?
You need to specify this dot state.
Yeah, because it's inside of an object. It's inside of the state object. Yeah, so we need to reference it firstly with this, and then secondly with state. Now it can find it. Let me just get rid of that warning because it's annoying me. Right, so now we've done the constructor, we've done super. Looks like we've correctly set an event. Let's test it out. Goes on. Does it go off? It does. Yeah. So we've now got the desired functionality. But down here, I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm still using this.props.first name and this.props.last name. So it would be nice perhaps if we destructured that so that we just have to type first name and last name. Yeah, and with the function, we could easily destructure it in the function arguments. But instead, with the class-based component, what you'll often see is, is a variable, yeah, and where would you put that variable? Would you put it in the render or in the constructor or either? Or? Yeah, exactly where I was just about to type it before. Gave you the hint. Yep, so we could... Are we reassigning any stage? No, we're not, right? So if I want to destructure and call these things, we could be really lazy, right? And do fname, comma, last name. And set those two variables equal to what? This.props. Yeah? Happy with that? And then, well, I mean, does it still work because we've used this.props there? It will still work, right? We haven't affected the reference to this dot props, we've just given ourselves an alias, if you like, a shorter version of referencing the same variable. So we can now remove this dot props from everywhere.
F-name, L-name.
So F name and L name. F name, L name, blah, blah, blah. Props. And it's saying undefined this dot props. Yeah, where do I need to reference my props?
Perhaps you need to put props in instructions.
In this instance, I think I'm going to need to put it up here. No.
Yeah, it should work fine without the constructor thing because we were doing it with props before.
Yeah, true. It's not defined.
Oh, it's because the props we're passing in are not F name, it's the first name and last name. So when we try that, it's
Oh, silly. Yeah. So I was being lazy and then actually breaking the whole code. So the props that we passed in were called first name and last name. And now it still works. Good. Yep. So generally you'll see the destructuring in class components written there. If we've got a functional component, it's quite nice because we can just do function user, and we could do first name, last name, like that. Right. What was the whistle for?
Oh, breathing.
Oh, okay. Just another one of your noises. Cool. Any questions on the intermediate one? Anything you want to change and be curious to see what happens if we change this or change that? So one of you wasn't quite sure about using the AND operator. So next board challenge is going to cover AND operators, OR operators, chaining them together. Porik's incredibly excited about that. Yeah. So. Oh, it is something you know. Okay, that's why he's so excited. He thinks he knows that one. So.
I think I know it. That's the key point.
Yeah, nice. So, all right. If there's no questions, we can leave it there. Well done for all getting through the board challenge today. Try not to leave it until the last day next time. But I know we had our special day on Tuesday. Huh?
Exactly.
Yeah. All right.